Aside from the spiritual aspects of our ministry, which is heavily involved prophetic studies, our ministry is primarily focused in the past on wilderness survival. There are other ministries already that are dealing with country living, and so I haven't really, felt the need to address that so much, because nobody's doing much with wilderness survival, and so I just, felt called to address that. Also, kind of what figured into that is back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was like that 1989, 1990 year, we had moved to some family property in Arkansas, and it's like way back at the end of the road, river through the backside of the property, perfect place for country living type place. And the week before Christmas, our house burned down. And so we did some soul searching in connection with all of that. It's like, Lord, do you really want us here? And if not, where do we go? And what came out of that is God sent me back to school to get my teaching credentials. And so I went into teaching for several years after that. But in that whole process, okay, we were set up for country living, or at least location-wise. We hadn't set up as much as we wanted to yet, because we were only there about a year. There was a little booklet that I had read in the past called God's Three Lines of Defense. I think James Lee wrote it, so I see a few heads nodding. You're familiar with that. And I'm not going to get into the whole booklet, but just basically those 3 lines of defense. The first line is the city missions. And then the second line of defense are the country outposts, and the third line of defense is like the wilderness. And so I thought, well, if I can't be in the country outpost to work the city from, my drawback or fallback place is the wilderness. And so I started studying wilderness survival very earnestly at that point. And we developed programs and still do programs on wilderness survival. And so I thought, well, that's going to be the focus of my ministry. However, within the last 3 years, we've moved again to 23.7 acres outside of Mariposa, California. And because of the place, we've been able to set up and do various programs. And just little by little, God's had me doing more and more stuff with country living. And I've come to realize that we have something unique to offer in the area of country living, and it's a message that needs to get out. That some of these other ministries that are addressing country living more directly are kind of overlooking, or, they've got their hands full and they're doing a good work, and I'm not faulting them. Some of them are good friends of mine. And so it's just, there's more to it, and I'll be sharing that with you here before too many hours go by at least. But, so anyway, that's kind of where we're at now, and we're trying to bring country living into, or this aspect of country living into our programs along with the wilderness survival, which has been a real challenge because we already had a full program, at least when it came to a weekend presentation. So anyway, I'm just saying that so you understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it a little bit more. What I want to do next, though, is what we call the survival priorities. And this fits for everything from normal life all the way through wilderness survival and also country living. And so this is like the framework on which we hang what we're going to be presenting from now on. Except we have one more major spiritual presentation. So let me find a pen here. And this is in one of the handouts in the booklet, but I'm not going to necessarily go there just yet, because this is a simple 5-point So these are the things that we need in order to survive. Okay? Whether we're home, whether we're out in the wilderness, wherever. Air is not on this list. That would be even more important than these. And they're called the survival priorities. And I really recommend that you memorize this list. Okay? Because these are the things that we need in order to keep alive. And so, what do you think they are? Water's number 2. Food is number 5. Shelter's number 1. What else? Fire is number 4. Number 3 is a little different from the rest of these in the way that we think about it anyway. I call it health concerns. I'll help you out there rather than make you guess. Health concerns is like safety, sanitation, hygiene, getting adequate rest, all of those things that we need to do in order to stay safe and healthy. And just let me give you the rationale for the particular order here. Shelter's number 1 because within hours you're going to want shelter from something. Okay, like right now we're seeking shelter from the rain. Water's number 2. We could make it, depending on the weather and our physical condition and so on, but we could make it into the next day without water. That's why water's number 2. Food's last because you can go a couple weeks without food. Might not feel real good about it, but you'll live. Health concerns is in the middle. It kind of umbrellas over all of them because you always want to stay safe and healthy. I mean, even under normal conditions, if you get sick or injured, your situation just got worse. So you always want to stay safe and healthy. And that's definitely true out in the wilderness. Fire is also sort of in the middle. It umbrellas over all of them. Also, you might want fire in connection with your shelter for light and or heat. Fire definitely to cook the food, fire to purify the water, fire to make tools, and so on. So that's the reason for that particular order. And again, I strongly recommend you memorize this list, so let's just go over them really quick. What's number 1? Number 2? Number 3? Number 4? Number 5? Okay. If you're ever in a survival situation, it's important that you put first things first. And this will help you do that. Okay, I remember a group of campers. I was working at camp through the 90s, our Adventist camp at Wawona, California, and teaching wilderness survival to the kids that came through camp. And we went on a trip once, and we didn't tell the kids that we were going to spend the night. And then when we got out there, it says, oh, by the way, we're cleared to spend the night. You guys up for it? And they're at first, yeah. And then it started sinking in exactly what was going to happen, and then they weren't so sure anymore. But we did spend the night, and so we decided, you know, we've been teaching these kids all week. We've been working on wilderness survival stuff, so we're just going to turn them loose and see what they do. Of course, they were looking to the staff for direction and everything, so we had to do some really crazy stuff to let them know that we wanted them to do what they had been taught rather than leaning on the staff to give them directions all the time. And anyway, things got really interesting on that. I'm not sure I'll ever do that again. But as soon as it started getting a little bit dark, when the mosquitoes come out, you know, and the kids were starting to get mosquito a little bit, and right away their priorities went to, they were like, okay, what can we do for the mosquitoes? And I told them, well, smoke is probably the best mosquito repellent I know of. Okay, we got to get a fire going. And they hadn't even started on their shelter yet. And all they could focus on was getting a fire going to get out of, you know, get the mosquitoes away from them. And I'm like, you know, okay, if you move around, you know, the mosquitoes have a hard time getting you too, and you'll be moving around while you're putting your shelter together, so you better get working on your shelter. They just wanted to make fire to get rid of the mosquitoes. And so, you know, finally the staff had to step back in and take some direction and says, okay, this is what has to happen, and you know, let's get to work. But in a survival situation, okay, it's really important that you do first things first, and shelter is number 1. Okay? Usually by the time you realize you're in a survival situation, it's late in the afternoon and there isn't that much daylight. And once it gets dark, it's really hard to do anything. And so, it's just really important that you put first things first, and that means you might not get some of this other stuff done, but you've got to at least get shelter taken care of. So, it really forces you to prioritize. So, what's number one? Number two? Number three? Number four? Number five? Some of you are looking at your notes. Put the notes away. We'll do it again. I've been a teacher too long. Number one. Number two. Number two. Three. Number four. Number five. Notice that food's last. Now, don't misunderstand me here. Let's be practical. If while I am going out and gathering shelter materials and I run across some wild edible plants, I'm going to say, oh, food's number five, I can't touch them, and just, no. You go ahead and either you gather them if you can do it easily, or you remember where they are, and as soon as you get your shelter built, you can go there and get them, even if it's maybe getting dark, right? So, I mean, you need all of these things. It's not that you have to focus on shelter and get shelter, then we focus on water. It's you need all of them. But your primary focus needs to be the shelter first, and then down the line. And just remember always to stay safe and healthy. Don't take any risks. It's not worth it, especially out in the wilderness.